Have shown a powerful and coordinated response to La République du Cameroon's ongoing attempts at assimilation. The people of Ambazonia, alongside the Ambazonian State Army, have continued to defy colonial oppression, standing firm against every attempt to erode their sovereignty, heritage, and territorial integrity. Good evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. It's been 3 months since I last sat at this desk, and in that time, Ambazonia's resolve has only grown stronger. The unwavering spirit of the Ambazonian people and their armed forces has been on full display, from successfully resisting colonial cultural impositions to executing highly strategic military operations in defense of the homeland. This resilience is further reflected in today's complete observance of the lockdown, Monday Goes Down, a clear message that Ambazonia will not bow to foreign rule or cultural infiltration. The people remain resolute, vowing to intensify measures against these persistent attempts at domination. Even in the face of hardship, Ambazonia's determination remains unshaken. From resisting colonial feasting to enduring power outages caused by decades of resource mismanagement, the struggle for self-determination is as alive as ever. And while the flames of neglect rage, whether through fire disasters with no emergency response or a nation left in the dark despite its natural energy wealth, the people's will burns brighter. Now, let's take a look at the prime headlines setting the stage for tonight's report. And these are the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. Another attempt at colonial intrusion and cultural assimilation sparks resistance. We see Santa village rejecting Atanga's creation of new village and imposed chief. We see the erosion as well of cultural values, with the NSODA Cultural and Development Association NSODA condemning the same-sex marriage following natives' union. We also see in the news colonial neglect and deprivation as Ambazonia continues to struggle with power outages and fire disasters. Today, Monday, March 31st, Ghost Town distances Ambazonians from Colonial CPDM's 40-year celebration. And on the African scene, we see France ending its military presence in Sahel region with handover of last base in Chad. Well, it is good to be back. While La République is still being La République, the slogan for Ambazonia still remains, until Boya, her emblematic symbol of freedom and sovereignty. Let's get the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. Welcome back once again. We see La République du Cameroon being caught meddling with Ambazonia's cultural heritage. Well, this time the people of Santa village are rising in protest against the arbitrary creation of a new village Santa Akum, and the planned installation of Mr. Fru Francis Wanki as its chief. To them, this is not just an administrative maneuver, but of course, a direct assault on their cultural identity and a deliberate attempt to sow division within their community. It is not the first time there has been an attempt at colonial intrusion and cultural assimilation. It has become a recurring offense, an unrelenting strategy of eroding Ambazonian tradition. Tensions have begun running high in Santa village over the past few days as locals have taken to the streets in defiance of this latest colonial overreach. With placards raised and voices united, we see residents making up clear messages that they reject the illegal enthronement of Mr. Fru Francis Wanki and refuse to acknowledge the so-called Santa Akum village. Well, according to a trusted source, the yet-to-be enthroned chief is a cousin to none other than the Colonial Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanga Ng, a man notorious for his repeated attempts to dismantle Ambazonia's autonomous institutions. For the people of Santa, this is not just a case of abuse of power, but a blatant manipulation of traditional structures to serve the interest of the colonial regime. Is it really a shocker that Atanga Ng's fingerprints are all over yet another nefarious assimilation agenda? Well, if this surprises you, then you perhaps don't even know the way to your backyard. Well, a pattern of colonial overreach looking back, this is hardly the first time Paul Atanga Ng has imposed leaders on institutions meant to function independently in Ambazonia. From meddling in religious affairs, unilaterally installing leadership in the true Church of God just last year, to forcing colonial-backed rulers onto Ambazonian communities, his actions continue to only mirror La Republique's broader agenda: infiltrate, control, and dismantle Ambazonian traditions from within. And even now, he remains ever present in the news, rarely for any great reason. Today's events reveal yet another display of Atanga Ng's unchecked power. With a stroke of a pen, a village is conjured out of thin air. And then, conveniently, his cousin is positioned to take the throne. Well, this is more than just lawlessness or abuse of office. It is a calculated move to assert dominance over Ambazonia's cultural institutions. His motivations remain unclear, but one thing is certain: Mr. Atanga Ng is up to something. Santa's resistance against colonial meddling, Boma Richard, the eldest prince of Santa Palace, voiced his fears about the unfolding situation. According to him, this kind of decision will only create tension and even conflict. Our village has always been peaceful, according to Prince Boma Richard. Now we also have another protester echoing the same sentiment, chanting Santa is Santa and Akum is Akum, reinforcing their stance that the two communities must remain distinct. The conflict surrounding Santa Akum is not new. A colonial prefectural order from June 15, 2017, along from April 8, 2021, explicitly barred Mr. Fru Francis Wanki from being recognized as chief of this so-called new village. Yet, despite these directives, the colonial regime continues to push its assimilation agenda. Ma Angela, a local resident, spoke passionately about the community's resolve, saying, "We want harmony in our community. A stranger can't just come in and claim that he will be chief. It would work, and we will not let it work." We also have Sule M., a representative of the Hausa community in Santa, who emphasized the lack of legitimacy in the move. He says the administration should put a stop to this disorder they're trying to create by setting up a village within a village. The new village has no proper boundaries or jurisdiction. And in a bid to have their grievances heard, these protesters marched to the Colonial Divisional Office, where they were met by local officials. Jules Roger Nkolo Vundi, La Republique's appointed divisional officer. attempted to reassure the crowd, claiming that his administration was working hard to maintain peace in Santa. For now, the scheduled enthronement of Fru Francis Wanki, originally set for March 27, 2025, has been postponed. While this may bring temporary relief, the lingering question remains: will Santa Akum ever again gain recognition, and will its so-called chief be imposed on the people by force, or will they eventually have a say to that? Well, with the people of Ambazonia doing their best to preserve the culture and traditions that define their identity amidst persistent colonial attempts at erasure, we cannot help but ask, how long can the people of Ambazonia hold out before the international community finally takes a stand against the ongoing annexation of a sovereign nation? We will continue to bring updates here on Undaunted as we keep a close watch on this ever-recurring issue. Oh, well, before we get on to the next on the line, we have with us in the studio the very esteemed barrister Mbeseha. Good evening, barrister.
Good evening to you.
Great to have you once again on the show. Well, we just looked at this report, and yet again the reoccurring incident of annexation or assimilation tactics, something we've seen severally happen. We saw this in countless scenarios from only last year, and we're getting to see that even in the year 2025, it continues. It hasn't stopped. What are your thoughts regarding to this?
I think it is more than assimilation. It is more than that. It is an exceptionally overreach into the culture, the tradition of the people. Because what is a village in the first place? A village is essentially a collection of people, starting from a family that may grow and get its leader, call it the village, or more modernized, a chief, and sometimes by extension, a farm. Villages, to the best of our knowledge and for our history that we know, were never created by some text from the governor's office. They were never created by some text from the administration, be it the colonial administration or the modern administration. That's not how villages were ever created. From simple settlements of often a family that evolves, grew in numbers, and becomes a village. They had a territory because someone settled there and built on the spot. And then as it developed, multiplied his family, they had lands, which was essentially. Then you had a boundary between them and other communities, which they give themselves names. These people settled in this valley are called whatever, and their boundary is from this stream, from this hill to the other one. That's the village. Government has never before been creating villages. What government has tried to do, which has almost failed, is to recognize those village leaders, those chiefs, by what they today call classification of those chiefs. First class, second class, third class. Those chiefdoms, call it first class, Fund of Mancom. It was not created, Fund of Mancom is first class. Fund of first class. Bale and Mancom were never created by some others from the government office. No. They go down to other small communities. They are not created from a government office. But what are they doing now? I say it is an overreach. Not just an overreach, it is a political and a overreach. Trying to create a village between Akum and Santa is a political maneuver that can also be added to economic advantage. Now, they have given chiefs the strength to become political. Chiefs also, as per the government text, they also go and sit in something they call the House of Chiefs, somewhere in Bamenda or in Boya. They get paid for that. So who knows? This new farm, so this new chief in the new village can, if the story is true, if it's close to Atanga, he will become a senator. He will become a regional chief. That comes with money. But above all, he will have political influence. That's the reason why they are doing that. But is this synonymous with what they is this on that they are doing this? No, of late we have seen this resurgence everywhere, most often in the southern zone of Amazonia. It is not new. We have seen the crisis that exists in Falco, for example, that has led to fighting over land, over land. The administration has gone there, yeah, as they do in Santa, and created chiefdoms that do not exist. As late as last week or 2 weeks ago, I saw them fighting. Government is trying to create a certain village between Ombe and Bonadikombo called Moliwe Village. Nobody lives there. That piece of land is essentially plantations. So this is plantations. But why are they trying to create a Moliwe village where they will name a Moliwe chief? It's purely economic and politically. Because the plantations that are between Ombe and Limbe are becoming the town. Create this thing called Moliwe village, name someone there as the chief, create 50 or 100 acres of land and give him. And in return, he will turn and give it to the administration. Because the Ukari chief, who are no followers, he has no natives. He cannot invent a population. It's something that is rare. You don't create, say for example, a Molewi village, you're like a Santa Akum village without a population. In the case of this southwest or whatever thing they call it, they are trying to create a Molewi village in what used to be a city station. But until you understand how these people are criminals, how did this place, particularly in Molewi, become a CDC plantation? It was nobody's village. 1884, when the Germans arrived there, most of Fako, they took the lands and made them their personal plantation. They left in 1915, 1919, after the First and Second World War. Those lands remained German plantations. But when they left, the government sought to use them for the community use. And in 1948, they created the CDC. Where was Molewe? They created the CDC, which has been exploiting those lands forever and ever. Why not create a Molewe village, rather than trying to give money where it does not need? So that is, in essence, it is a political, it's an economic adventure. Remember people like Moja, these creations of villages. So historically, worldwide, villages become extinct when people cease to be there. You cannot revive an extinct village. They are either extinct because most of them are dead, or they have been to different parts of the world. They are not going to come back to reconstitute that village anymore. But the government is anxious, is interested in creating a Molewe village, maybe a Santa Akum village, because they have a political agenda to fulfill. We've said it's an overreach and maybe assimilation, because the chiefs, the Northwest, call it Northwest, the Northern Zone, the ones of the Southern Zone are very different from the chiefs of the colonizers. What we say chiefs and farms. The farm Mancom, Chief Indele, Chief of Boya, Paramount Chief of Boya, the fund of Bale and all those ones. They will go and sit in the meeting. If they bring their own chiefs, their own colonial territory, what will they find? It doesn't deal with the Yaoundé. They will find a certain chief Atanga of Yaoundé, who was the creation of the administration, of the French administration. Where is Kake shirt? Why the traditional rulers were wearing their traditional regalia that all of us know? This guy will be sitting there and equated himself to the fund of ballet, to the fund of Banso, to the fund of black food, and so on and so forth. And so that is part of the assimilation. But again, as far as what you have said concerning Santa Akum is concerned, this is an overreach, a political overreach, a cultural overreach, a historical overreach, which should not be allowed to happen. And so these people, in Santa particular, they are already taking the first step. They have to resist and resist and resist as far as it is possible. They prefer, or the super-prefer, they go and see him there in Santa. He doesn't have any power. He has no powers. Because all they do is to refer it Mr. Atanga, who oversees the Yaoundé there as the colonial minister, to resolve it. They will not resolve it because it is in their interest. They didn't just imagine it from heaven. To do. And so we say congratulations to the people of Santa. I know Santa very well. I know where Akum is living through that area. It's right that they are resistant. The resistance which is going on now should succeed. And if it succeeds, that will succeed. We will set a precedent for what might happen somewhere else in Indu, in Kambe, in Wom, in Mamfe, in Bamenda, Kumba. That nonsense will stop. The culture of overreach is unacceptable. We are who we are. It is those villages, it is we who constitute the population of the so-called Cameroon and the so-called Ambazonia. We respected our traditions. We respected our culture. That is why even the colonial master, when he came to Ambazonia, what we call today Ambazonia, he had what they call indirect rule. They depended mostly on those chiefs in those villages. They were active participants in the administration. And so Ambazonians should resist from such cultural assimilation. It should resist from such cultural overreach. And so we can only say congratulations to the people of Santa for taking the first steps. We will do whatever it takes to assist them in their resistance. Over to you.
Mbeseha, when you say we respect our culture, that is very true when it comes to the Ambazonian people. But then speaking of that, a recent news, as if the colonial incursions and attempts to assimilate Ambazonia wasn't enough. Civilization seems to be eroding the last bit of the Ambazonian culture, particularly as we see in Unso, where the Unso Cultural and Development Association, NSODA, had to strongly denounce the same-sex marriage of Bandi Kiki, a well-known Unso woman, to her Nigerian wife in the United Kingdom on March 24. The controversial union, officiated by another Unso woman, has ignited outrage within the Unso community, with NSODA calling on traditional authorities to reaffirm their opposition to such marriages, which they view as a violation of cultural and moral principles. NSODA's position on same-sex marriage in the press release issued this month shows the NSODA condemning Kiki's self-identification as Shay lesbian. That was a proud assertion, arguing that the appropriation of the Shay honorific, a title reserved for individuals who have made significant contributions to the Unso community, disrespects tradition. The association emphasized that same-sex marriage remains a serious cultural taboo as it is illegal in Ambazonia. NSODA further stressed the importance of preserving the moral and ethical foundations of Unso culture, urging the community to reject what it described as external influences attempting to undermine long-standing traditions. The statement called on Unso women to distance themselves from Kiki's actions and encourage mothers to instill in their children the cultural dishonor associated with same-sex relationships, call for traditional and legal actions in response to the controversy as well. And so that has called upon traditional leaders to take decisive actions against what it views as the erosion of Unso cultural identity. The association urged traditional authorities to enforce cultural laws against public displays of same-sex affection and demanded that legal measures be strengthened to preserve and prevent the normalization of same-sex unions within the community. Now, NSODA also reaffirmed its commitment to upholding Unso traditions, warning that any attempt to subvert cultural values will be met with firm resistance. The association's leadership vowed to work closely with traditional rulers and community stakeholders to ensure the cultural expectations are not compromised. Now, as Ambazonia continues to navigate the complexities of cultural preservation and evolving societal norms, NSODA's stance highlights the ongoing debate over identity, tradition, and modern influences. While Bandi Kiki's marriage has sparked significant backlash within the Nso community, it also raises broader discussions about individuals' freedom versus collective cultural values. The coming months may say increased pressure on both traditional leaders and the Ambazonian legal framework to define the boundaries of cultural and moral standards in the evolving landscape of Nso identity. Barrister Mbeseha, this topic seems to be one of great concern and one that in the subsequent times we hope to even delve deeper on and expand on, because this particular case, Barrister Mbeseha, has quite a number of intricacies to it. Is first, the disrespect of the Amazonian culture, which according to the NSODA, such same-sex marriage goes very much against the culture of Ambazonia. That is one. And we have two, not only these couple disrespect the culture, they go as far as disrespecting such an honorable title, putting on there, instead of something more honorable, something that goes with the tag of a lesbian, like that is some sort of high achievement. And on another flip side, I get to ask this question to you, Barrister Mbeseha. Do you think somehow, since the Colonial president's daughter, Brenda Bia, happened to also identify somehow with this and gets away with it in Cameroon, in La Republique, do you think this somehow influences and inspires other people to see it as okay to come out as being lesbian and even glorify it with such traditional titles?
The question, if asked, is whether it influences other people. Certainly it does. It does. Especially when it is done by people who are of the so-called common nationality. But Colonial law, that is not even recognized. It influences people, mostly because it is done by the head of state's own daughter. But we're not analyzing that. I think Kiki, the bouncer woman, this woman who marries another woman somewhere as a husband. The important thing is to know, we'll talk about overreach. We'll talk about cultural overreach in the last segment. The bouncers, the insults, and so could whatever thing we call it there, they should also know their own limits. From what I've seen in this story, this marriage, if it is a marriage, took place somewhere in London. It didn't occur in a certain compound, palace, or somewhere in Solan. It took place in a different country. Might be in that country to recognize same-sex marriage is possible. Cameroon people instruct the British or any country that recognizes same to stop it. They cannot. Impossible. They cannot do that. But they can influence it as long as their own daughter or their own child is involved in it. They can affect that child. I hear they call her Kiki. If Kiki is a reasonable title in the South land, that's good. The first step they should have taken, which you should take, I don't know whether they have not done it, is to destitute her of that title. So you don't have this title anymore because this title does not entitle you to go do what you're doing. That's the limited power that they have. And so once they do that, I don't know what they mean by their own culture. She cannot come home one day, one evening, to meet her father and to meet her parents-in-law, to meet her friends, to meet her community people to say, I've come with my husband, and then sit on that reserve for those who carry that title, Kiki. That's the limited thing that they can do. Influential, very, very important, because it depends upon whether this young lady cares about the subculture. If she does care, she will know that she has been ostracized doing what she did. And so, in Ambazonia, we don't even need to analyze that. There's nothing like same-sex marriage in Ambazonia. There are several steps to get. You see, you would there. People might be doing whatever thing you like. They're like later people call it whatever thing gymnastics you're playing there. It's not yet marriage. It's not yet marriage. By our own tradition, be it in in Bamenda, be it in Du, you come home and do the traditional of the marriage. That's enough. After that, to make it a marriage, you have remote, maybe get a marriage certificate. After that, maybe in some instances, you have to go into a certain church and obtain a blessing from a pastor. This has not been done. It is not in Ambazonia. Also, even in Ambazonian eyes, they have not violated any law because they don't exist. They don't exist in terms of marriage, that there's something like that. But limited to so, the girl carrying the title Kiki has violated the culture under which she was crowned a Kiki. They should take an action. It does not even require national action. It requires the Nsot people to stop it by using this method. She can say, well, I'm not coming back home there. So be it. She's exiled. She has no interest in coming back. But it has a lot of meaning. Because she doesn't just live in London. Back in London, if she's still a bouncer, she will have her parents back home in Southland. She will have her grandparents, her granduncles. Is she prepared to lose all these connections in the name of a marriage? Because she's not going to come back home anytime soon with her children and grandchildren out of that marriage. Same-sex marriage does not produce children. And so that's the way it is not possible. But if it's happening in London, as Thursday is, won't have a limited influence we can do to change it. If the people who live in London, if the country under which London is found recognizes same-sex marriage. So we'll call on the bunch of people to act quickly, act culturally, act traditionally. Those are the limits that they have. But those limits have influence, and they have meaning in their own lives. Over to you.
Mbeseha, away from cultural concerns, we take a look at the continuous suffering of Ambazonia, which we see it faces from relentless power outage, which is a stark reminder of the La Republique's colonial regime's neglect and mismanagement of resources. Now, despite being home to Menchum Falls, one of the most powerful hydroelectric sites in West Africa, capable of supplying electricity to the entire region, Ambazonia remains engulfed in darkness and deprivation. It has been repeatedly noted that Menchum Falls has the capacity to generate enough electricity not only for Ambazonia but also for its neighbors. However, the La Republique colonial regime has deliberately failed to harness this resource, leaving Ambazonians to struggle with unreliable electricity, crippling businesses, hospitals, and schools. The economic consequences are dire, as industries are forced to shut down, students cannot study, and medical facilities struggle to function, all due to the lack of stable power supply. The regime's failure to develop Menchum Falls is yet another example of its blatant disregard for the welfare of Ambazonians. While other regions under La Republique's control enjoy better electricity infrastructure, Ambazonia is left to decay. This calculated neglect only fuels the resolve of the Ambazonian people to demand self-determination, knowing that their future under the colonial system is one of perpetual suffering. While Ambazonians are still grappling with the consequences of such energy crisis, we see other sectors remain in an equally devastating state of dilapidation and even nullity. Now, among the most alarming issues in the absence of electricity being our former focus is the fire brigade absence in Ambazonia. We see wildfire outbreaks sweeping through Bunduma Boya just yesterday on Sunday, March 30th. Bunduma Boya in the Atlantic zone of Fako suffered a devastating fire outbreak that caused losses worth hundreds of millions of francs CFAs. The delayed response from the so-called fire brigade under the control of La Republique only exacerbated the situation. The cause of the fire remains unknown. However, eyewitnesses reported that the blaze started at a sawmill before rapidly spreading to a nearby car park, consuming multiple vehicles. A commercial building in the area was also affected, destroying several shops and parts of a car dealership. Now, despite desperate efforts by local residents to contain the flames, their lack of proper firefighting equipment meant they could do little to stop the fire from spreading. With no functional fire service in Boya, the community was left to fend for itself, watching helplessly as properties worth an estimated 300 million franc CFAs reduced to ashes. Now, while some unconfirmed reports speculate that the fire was caused by individuals illegally selling fuel locally known as fungi, others believe it originated within the sawmill premises. But the real issue shouldn't just be the cause of the fire, but also the fact that time and time again, after repeated fire disasters, Ambazonia still does not have a reliable fire service unit, not anyone in sight. The La Republic colonial regime, which is quick to meddle in Ambazonian traditions and culture, has shown no interest in providing essential emergency response services. After countless fire outbreaks, numerous requests for a fire truck, the region remains without one. So, where does that leave the Ambazonian people? Forced to be extremely cautious, knowing that in the event of another disaster, they will be left alone to watch helplessly until Ambazonia finally reclaims its sovereignty and builds a system that prioritizes the safety and well-being of its people. Well, before we head on to the very last report on the home front, Barton Mbeseha, I would like to get your thoughts one more time. This is not the first, it is not the second, and from the look of things, sadly, would not be the last. We're facing lack of basic infrastructure and amenities in Ambazonia, as well as facing fire incidents with no hope of a fire brigade squad in sight. This is not the first, it is not the second. Yet another reoccurrence. What are your thoughts this time about this?
Well, that report calls for me to divide the analysis I want to make into two. We'll deal with mention force, and then deal with the firefighters, fire disasters in town. You see, by the analysis you have put there, which is just a study, the mention force would provide energy beyond mention. It's going to provide the whole of it is possible. It's going to go beyond the borders of Cameroon, if developed. But they have not developed it. I would not expect them to develop it because they will not do it. That would take me to say, for example, if we develop it, but there were plans we had in Ambazonia that was already supplying us electricity, reliable electricity. Maybe we've forgotten or be reminded. There was something called a Yoke, electric power plant. What did they do? They destroyed it, removed the equipment from there. It was supplying the whole of Fako. But as soon as it purportedly joined these people, they destroyed it. They didn't know that we needed electricity in Moyo, in Boya, our headquarters. They knew it. What did they do to have it in a day? Destroy what we had, what they could take away from it, and kill it. Till today, Yoke is dead. Not just dead. I remember 5-10 years ago, every year they purport to give a contract to some of their friends to go and clear that spot. I said they can rebuild the place. It is all political maneuvering. And so if they could do all that to us, was it a mistake? No, it was an act of wickedness. Because as we speak, there's no info. The electricity plant is dead, was killed by them. And so you go now over to the mention for. You say mention for could bring electricity to everybody. They kill Yoke. And in return for killing Yoke, they purportedly tried to create 7 other electrical plants in the whole country. Idea, Sonolu, and others. None of those places, none of those plants that have never been materialized was projected to be in mention. Nothing. Of the 700 plants that they wanted to save the country, none of them was located in the Mention River. Because they imagined, even people in Mention, people in Bamenda, they were better served by driving 400 kilometers to there, putting poles, wooden poles from there to come and serve all our own regional areas. They left it there. So it was no mistake at all. They knew what they were doing. It's an act of wickedness. Then I can go fast now to what is so-called firefighters. We have analyzed many times before. Firefighting is supposed to be the responsibility at least council. The council is supposed to have equipment for that. Is it buying a fire truck first? Just call it 200 million, which is not even worth that amount. Is it what's above the government of Cameroon? Certainly not. Is it what is above the Limbe, Victoria City Council? Certainly not. Because Limbe City Council is supposed to be the richest by virtue of the fact that Sonora is right there. By virtue of the fact that the CDC is basically big. So they have enough money to provide those things. Why are they not providing them? There's no firefighting station in the whole of Fako division. Absolutely nothing. Why are they not having it? Is it because they don't know if fire will break up there? They know, of course, the fire will break up. They know that. They have a firefighting department in Fako. But where is it located at? It is located at Sonora and meant only for Sonora. Because that's where they make the oil. That's where they steal the money. Even if there's a fire burning in town, just 2 to 5 kilometers away, that firefighting department will not even come. Because it is not Sonora, they had to protect Sonora, which they never protected anyway, because 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the same Sonora got burned down. They burnt it down. It is not yet repaired as we speak. And so this is a wicked regime. These are people who do not need to be with them. That is one of the reasons why we fight. Why we fight. If we establish ourselves in Boya, we will develop Menchum. It will be a source for electricity supply. And we will be young. It will be a source of economic generation, income generation. We will put that thing abroad. We will send it to other countries, Nigeria. They will pay for us. They will pay to us for having the electricity. Will they let us do this? No. But shall we get it? Of course. We'll get it if we fight, and we're fighting, if we continue to fight and make them bear the cost of the fighting. That's the reason why we fight. Those are the reason why we need our. And that is the reason why we've been trying to explain. Ambazonian struggle is not about posts given to a Tanganji or to you and me. It is not about the post they create and give somebody and call him a senator. It is about our own institutions. People who have the right to say we can put an electric generating plant here, and we'll put it. It is about ourselves taking full control of our own self. Deciding where a road will pass, deciding where we'll put our water, all these things need money, deciding how we use our money, how we get it from ourselves. That's what the fight is all. It is not about posts. It is not about living with Francophone now. Living in a free Ambazonia, they will free to come and live with them. They will enjoy those electrical facilities. They have all those facilities there. They will enjoy, like I'm sitting here abroad. They enjoy in London. They enjoy in Paris. They enjoy in the United States or somewhere else around the world. They will come and enjoy, subject to the fact that they pay taxes, subject to the fact that they respect our own laws. You pay for what you use. You respect the laws of Amazonia. All those things will come to pass. It's time, luckily for us, the mess are still there and are not going to dry off the next 50 years or the next century. So as long as we set our foot in Boya, we will construct those things. That the thing alone, mention force will bring us enough money to have enough fighting stations, equipment in Ambazonia alone. And so we shall have overcome a lot of things. Again, summary, let us fight for the restoration of our own institutions, not for the chicken, not for what we get from the table of General. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Barrister Mbeseha, for those very wise words. Still on the report on the home front, today is yet another Monday. And while Mondays are traditionally observed as ghost towns in Ambazonia, today's ghost town held even greater significance. March 31st served as a symbolic rejection of all colonial feasting, coinciding with the 40th anniversary celebration of the CPDM party an event Ambazonians view as a reminder of their enslavement on the La République du Cameroon. Now, in a powerful display of resistance and defiance, Ambazonians observed a total ghost town today, deliberately distancing themselves from the 40th anniversary celebration of the CPDM party. Now, for the Amazonian people, this was not just a routine shutdown, but a clear statement of rejection, a refusal to participate in the glorification of a regime that has long oppressed them. The CPDM party, led by President Paul Biya, has controlled the Cameroons for over 4 decades, entrenching the marginalization and subjugation of Ambazonians. Its anniversary celebration is only seen as yet another attempt to legitimize its continued grip on power and uphold the colonial era status quo. By reinforcing the ghost town observance on the particular Monday today, Ambazonians have sent an unambiguous message that they refuse to endorse or engage in any event that celebrates La République's colonial rule. Now, this collective act of civil disobedience underscores their unwavering determination to break free from the shackles of occupation and chart their own course towards full independence. The ghost towns are a regular occurrence in Ambazonia. Every Monday, March 31st, today stood out as a deliberate and symbolic rejection of colonial festivities. It was a bold reaffirmation of Ambazonia's commitment to its liberation struggle. As Ambazonians continue to resist La République's occupation, one thing remains clear: there is no space for La République activities in Ambazonia. The CPDM party's anniversary celebration is merely another desperate attempt to assert control over a people who have long rejected its rule. However, Ambazonians have made it evident that such attempts will no longer be tolerated. And before we leave the home front, Barrister Mbeseha, today is not any other Monday. It is the 40th anniversary celebration of the party that Ambazonians consider the party that enslaved the Southern Cameroons, the CPDM party. And in solidarity, Ambazonians en masse decided to boycott any form of activities and respect a total ghost town today. What would you remark looking at the scenario today?
What I remark is that ghost towns are the most important tool we have. They remain the most important tool, because civil disobedience is not easy to control. It's civil. You love your house and go and sleep in your house. And so for me to continue, I would like to refer a few things that were said about ghost town just as late as yesterday. Last Sunday, that was yesterday, I watched, there are a lot of programs in the food home front that the interview people to talk. There was an interview granted by one of those medias to the Archbishop of Bamenda. And among other, he said ghost towns were the things he disagreed with. They hurt the people, he said, so much that he found on it for it. Now, we use this opportunity to how does the people? We in the church, we go to church, I will observe a Sunday, where the church tells us that Sunday remain home and pray to God. What is wrong with us having our own country Sunday, call it Monday? Remain there and pray for our anybody. Nobody is hurt. Nobody is even informed. We just stay at home and the message is sent. The idea is to send the message to the world that we disagree and will continue to disagree with the system in place. But the Archbishop did not end there. He said many other things that were so interesting, and I should note them. He said, for the past 7 years, there have been wars and wars and wars. He thought, recommended, that the government should sit down and talk with everybody, including independentists, he said. Because, in his own words, you can go around and kill everybody who is fighting that you dislike. Disagree with, you can kill every Ambazonian, he said. You're not going to kill the spirit of Ambazonia. The spirit cannot be killed with a gun. And so that's what I take from it there. Yes, kill everybody because people catch them up. The spirit of Ambazonia has come. Even after we settle in Boya, something will be done, be it a museum we put out there in remembrance of this aspect of towns. Also, we're happy that people have come to live with it. We're now 7 years into it. If not around that, we're quite old into it. Ghost Town should not be any surprise to anybody. You should attempt to violate Ghost Town as you want making the mistakes, not those who enforce it. And so, Ambazonians, those who are fighting, those who are not fighting, you have only one tool, those who are not fighting. The tool of not talking, keeping your mouth shut. The tool of keeping your stock shut. The tool of going and lying down on Monday every day, every week, and saying, well, this is all I can sacrifice the revolution. Yes, nobody hurt. But you're sleeping in your bedroom, hurts the women here on there so much. They feel pain, even when you don't see you. That was all allow to disrupt Ghost Town. Otherwise, the concern there. You pay your pattern, your licenses to sell or to do something. That day you say you're not selling. How painful is it to them? So it's interesting that silence, which is Ghost Town, is hurting so much that they go around begging the world to stop you from being silent. So Ghost Towns are the best tools we have because they involve everybody. They are the best tool that we have because they hurt you on the more than the soldiers they kill. How many times have they come out on the national studio to talk about 10 soldiers, 10 of their soldiers, 20, 50 who have been killed or wounded? They don't talk about that. They talk about Ghost Town. Why? Why? We just saw them last week. They lost 12 by Boko Haram. You don't hear that being talked there, but they talk about Ghost Town. So Ghost Town to them is more important than the life they lost. It is more important than some other. It is more important than the French in Boya. They don't talk about that. Ghost Town remains, as I think, from those reactions, they are the best tool we have. And the tool of the silent man, the tool of quietness. Stay quiet and your enemy will feel hurt. Pay price for staying quiet? No. In fact, you have a blessing by having a good sleep. So I encourage everybody to observe the Ghost Town. Those who are violating it are making the saddest errors in their lives. Respect it. To the fool, the enemy will cry. Why you keep you quiet? The enemy finds a solution to the Ghost Towns. Over to you.
All right, Barrister Mbeseha, you made a resounding emphasis on the importance of Ghost Town and even more reasons why this Ghost Town should be respected and is indeed effective, even if it's silent. Well, thank you once again for joining us on Undaunted, Barrister Mbeseha. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you for having me.
And have a good night. And we'll move on with the rest of Undaunted, getting onto the news around Africa. And in news across Africa, we see France ending military presence in Sahel region with handover of the last base in Chad. The French army has officially ended its military presence in Chad with the handover of its last base in a ceremony in the capital, N'Djamena. The general staffs of both countries announced the transition on Thursday. In late November, Chad abruptly ended its military cooperations with France, its former colonial ruler. As a result, French troops began withdrawing from the country in late December. The transfer of the Kosei base marks the conclusion of France's military presence in Chad. In accordance with the directive leadership, French troops had previously withdrawn from their Faya Largo base in northern Chad on December 26th, followed by the evacuation of a second base in Abeche on January 11th this year. During the Abeche handover, Chadian authorities reiterated that the January 31st deadline for the complete French withdrawal was final. President Mahamat Idris Deby Itno, in power since 2021, stated that the military cooperation's agreement with France had become obsolete due to shifting political and geostrategic realities. French soldiers and fighter aircraft had been stationed in Chad almost continuously since its independence in 1960, primarily to support and train the Chadian military. Chad was a key element in France's military presence in Africa and its final foothold in the broader Sahel region. France was forced to withdraw its troops from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger following a series of military coups in those countries. The new military authorities in these nations have increasingly aligned themselves with Russia in recent years. At its peak, France's Sahel contingent comprised more than 5,000 troops as part of Operation Barkhane, an anti-jihadist campaign that officially ended in November 2022. Well, French President Emmanuel Macron, in a New Year's speech to diplomats, expressed frustration over the lack of acknowledgement from African nations for France's decade-long efforts against Islamist insurgencies in the region. Meanwhile, Senegal is negotiating the withdrawal of French forces by the end of 2025. France is also reducing its military presence in Ivory Coast and Gabon as part of a broader restructuring of its engagement in West and Central Africa. Additionally, its base in Djibouti, which hosts 1,500 troops, is being developed as a strategic hub for future operations in Africa following the Sahel withdrawal. Now on the foreign scene, we see pissed off at Putin. Trump threatens tariffs on Russian oil if Moscow blocks Ukraine deal. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Sunday has threatened Russia President Vladimir Putin that he would impose secondary tariffs of 25% to 50% on buyers of Russian oil if he determined that Moscow was obstructing his efforts to end the war in Ukraine. In a telephone interview with NBC News, Trump expressed frustration over Putin's recent comments questioning the credibility of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership. The television network reported that Trump was particularly upset about the remarks, which he viewed as a hindrance to peace efforts. Since taking office in January, Trump has pursued a more conciliatory approach towards Russia, raising concerns amongst Western allies as he seeks to negotiate an end to the three-year-old war. However, his sharp criticism of Putin on Sunday signaled growing impatience with a lack of progress towards a ceasefire. We'll take a look at Trump speaking to reporters. He reiterated his disappointment with Putin but remained optimistic. He also indicated that the proposed trade measures could be enacted within a month.
United States of America over the decades. They ripped us off like no country's ever been ripped off in history. And we're going to be much nicer than they were to us, but it's substantial money for the country nevertheless. I think he's going to be good. And I certainly wouldn't want to put secondary tariffs on Russia, but if they were put on, it would not be very good for them. We put secondary tariffs on, as you know, in Venezuela, and it's had a very strong impact on Venezuela. You know that every ship just got out and they left. A lot of them left. They dropped the hoses right into the ocean and they left. They didn't want to be there for a minute because they didn't want those tariffs to catch on, or they didn't want me to see them there. So the Venezuela secondary tariffs, all secondary tariffs are very strong because essentially it says if you disobey our orders, you cannot do business in the United States of America, and that's the cash cow.
There was no immediate response from Moscow. Russia has repeatedly dismissed Western sanctions as illegal and accused the West of leveraging economic restrictions for strategic advantage. Now, during his weekend at his Palm Beach estate in Florida, Trump told Embassy News he planned to speak with Putin in the coming days. The two leaders have held at least 2 publicly disclosed telephone conversations in recent months, though the Kremlin has suggested that additional discussions may have taken place. Although the White House did not comment on when the call would occur or when Trump would also speak with Zelensky. Meanwhile, Trump has placed significant emphasis on ending what he calls a ridiculous war, referring to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. However, his efforts have yet to yield substantial result. On Friday, Putin proposed placing Ukraine under a temporary administration to facilitate new elections, a move that could potentially remove Zelensky from office. Trump, who has also advocated for new elections in Ukraine and criticized Zelensky as an autocratic leader, acknowledged his frustration with Putin but described the relationship as good. Trump's remarks came after a meeting with Finnish President Alexander Stubb in Florida on Saturday. Stubb, during his surprise visit, reportedly urged Trump to set a deadline for achieving a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire and suggesting April 20th as a target date, which would mark 3 months since Trump took office. Meanwhile, U.S. officials have been encouraging Kyiv to accept a critical minerals agreement. A summary of the proposal suggests the United States is seeking long-term access to Ukraine's natural resources. Zelensky has stated that his legal team is reviewing the draft before providing further comment. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One, Trump speculated that Zelensky might be reconsidering the rare earth mineral deal, cautioning if he tries to back out of it, he's going to have big problems. He also reiterated that Ukraine would never be part of NATO. Trump's latest tariff threat would add to trade restrictions already affecting China, India, and other nations, including recent tariffs on steel, aluminium, and automobiles. Additional duties on imports from countries with the largest trade surpluses are expected also to be announced on Wednesday. And that is it for Undaunted tonight. Coming up next is the recap. On Undaunted tonight, we looked at another attempt at colonial intrusion and cultural assimilation, sparking resistance in Santa village as they reject Atanga's creation of new village and imposed chief. We also saw the erosion of cultural values, the Cultural and Development Association NSODA condemning the same-sex marriage following a natives union. Colonial neglect and deprivation. Ambazonia continuing to struggle with power and fire disasters amid colonial neglect. Today being Monday, March 30th, a ghost town with significance distancing Ambazonians from Colonial CPDM's 40th year celebration. And in Africa, we saw France ending its military presence in Sahel region with handover of last base in Chad. And that was it on tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. We'll leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.